Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. It's been a while since I've made a video, and I want to start making videos more regularly. Some of you may or may not be into these videos, but I really feel like I want to try to do different things from time to time. Some of them might be deep or intellectual, some of them might just be casual and fun, but I really do want to just share different thoughts from time to time. Hopefully you get a benefit. If you don't, that's okay. There's plenty of videos out there. I'll continue to post videos that you may be interested in. But today I just was been thinking about the Ketanji Brown, some of the comments I've heard, or just watching people try to struggle with what is truth. You know, what is a woman? What are these things? And it just got me thinking about kind of more philosophically about some things about where we are as a society and just where we are even in our Christian faith, and how easy it is to get stuck up into kind of these weird mental spaces where you're not allowed to address what is real, and you're almost fearful of what's addressing what is real, and just how dangerous that can be. The thing about truth is that if you don't know what it is, you're very likely to be professing something that could harm others or yourself or just your own soul. And it is vitally important for the life of a Christian to have the ability and to grow in the maturity of understanding what truth is. And this is where that little skeptical voice in your head pops in and says, well, how do you really know anything for sure? And I think that's a good question to have. And I'm not one that thinks that one cannot be skeptical. In fact, I think quite the opposite, that we live in a world that is so afraid for anyone to question anything about our own worldview or our own beliefs, that somehow that conflict is actually negative in the Christian community, and getting along and feeling compassion is somehow more beneficial for the life of a Christian. I don't find this to be true in Scripture. I don't find this to be true in the Bible. In fact, I find this very, very complicated mixture of God really explaining difficult truths to people, even when they don't want to hear them. Truths that also you see Paul laying out in the congregations of the churches that he's trying to reach, very critical observations about what is going on in the conduct of the church. So much so that people have really hated Paul's writings in the modern sense because they feel he's too critical. And what they fail to see is the balance in the Bible between what real compassion is and what real truth is. And that one of the least compassionate things that you can do for someone is not offer any love of criticism or of observation of things that you see in their life. Now, when you love someone and you love them well enough, you kind of know how they're going to take some of these truths. But if at any point you find yourself in your life not being able to process information that is negatively attributed to you because you're defensive, then that's an internal problem of not being able to identify truth within yourself, or truth that you don't really have a grasp on what the Bible says is true of human nature. And I would caution anyone in that situation to not be so closed off to the criticisms. And some of the best criticisms I've been offered in my life have come from people who really don't like me, don't have my best interest at heart, have really tried to take me down a peg. But in knowing that there may be a kernel of truth, it doesn't mean that I go to them and submit to them in some way, because their motives are totally different. But it does mean that I submit myself to the truth that is God. And what I mean by that is all truth is God's truth. It is his attribute of truth. Knowing the truth that is in me, even if it's hurtful or painful, is vitally important to the life of a Christian. And so what does that have to do with Ketanji Brown or other things is, I think when you come to a point in your life when you are unable or unwilling for whatever reason to proclaim something to be true because it interferes with another aspect of your belief, that is a cognitive dissonance that is harmful to you and to society. So what do I mean by that? Well, during the time where she was standing before the Supreme Court, a question was asked to her, what is a woman? And her response is, I can't answer that. Well, either you can't answer that because you can't identify what a woman is, and therefore I don't know if you should be on the Supreme Court. My own personal opinion, you can take that or leave it. Or you're lying about it because it interferes with another belief that you hold. And that is an inconsistency in your worldview. You should be able to articulate why it is you hold one position and how it's different in another regards. And people have argued this, but we're getting to a point where we're just not answering questions to people because they're opposition, or they're the bad guy, or whatever they think about the person that's opposing us and whatever their motives are. I want you to know that as a Christian, that's not something we are able to do. And that doesn't mean you have to submit to your enemies. It does mean, though, that you need to reconcile that truth somehow, somewhere in your personal life, with your friends, or in your time with the Lord, but even more so with wise people who've worked through some of these issues. I think if you don't know what a woman is, and then you don't know when life begins, then how can you adjudicate about the most fundamental aspects of the law and justice if you don't know what they mean and know what it is or when life begins? And if you really do think you know when life begins, why are you lying about not being forthright, at least I should say, in your ability to communicate with people? Are you really afraid of your worldview, of the inconsistencies in your own worldview, or are you afraid that if you say your worldview, it might not be popular, and you're more concerned about popularity and winning than you are actually proclaiming truth? And there's a dirty little secret, I think, in life, that I don't know if truth is something anybody's really as much interested in anymore. I think we live in a world that even in the Christian community can really favor favorable circumstances over truth. And so people get really like, well, what is truth? And you almost have a Pontius Pilate situation where Pilate is standing for Jesus. And the reason why Pilate is doing this is because he comes from that philosophical world saying, can you really know anything for true, Jesus? And Jesus goes, yeah, you can. And it starts with revelation, knowing that to us, for Christians, that God is true, and that his worldview is logical and it makes sense, and it's livable, and it's knowable, and it's not something we all can hold as individuals, but that God actually gives wisdom to his church and his community, and that we are supposed to be open to that community, to evaluating and assessing our personalities, and not just chasing after the communities that reinforce our own particular belief and behaviors. See, the thing about modern church that's so scary to me is it allows you to go anywhere you want with any theological pet theory you want and find some kind of affirming group that will administer the truth that you feel on the inside is the most true. And in that is a kind of deception, a self-deception. See, in the ancient world, you couldn't just pick up and move. You kind of had to deal with Paul. And if he was mad at you, he was the guy who founded the church, or he had the person who was the elder. You kind of had to work through the difficulties within communities. Nowadays, if you're hurt, you can just pick up and move on. You don't have to actually do those kind of conflict resolutions, or at least find some way to reconcile those things. And so what you've created with YouTube and internet and Twitter is a kind of a feedback loop that makes it real tempting to kind of be self-deceptive. And I feel like if you don't even believe in objective truth, and you actually believe truth is what we make of it, then do you really believe there's anything that's true at all? And then you have a real serious problem. You have the problem that C.S. Lewis mentioned about seeing through a world that's invisible, and you're just blind at that point because you can't see anything. And so that's why it's vitally important when it says God starts with his attributes. And he does say, I am the God of truth, and I am a God of compassion. I am a God of gracious, and I believe in justice. And so asking ourselves from time to time, well, what do I think is true and how do I know it, is a good place to struggle with. So if that's something you're struggling with, I'd love to talk with you about it. I think we don't talk about these fundamental questions enough. But if you are a thinker or a reader, I'd like to challenge you to read a book. It's a little wonky, but it's one of my favorite philosophers. He wrote a book called The 6 Great Ideas. It's a guy named Mortimer Adler. This is really philosophical. Yes, he is a Christian, but he's writing from a philosophical point of view. And what he's saying is that all these truths, all these different beliefs, they interconnect in different ways. So if you don't know what truth is, then you can't know what's good. And if you don't know what's good is, you can't know what to do with your life. We're supposed to pursue that which is good. And if we don't know what good is, and we don't know what's true is, then we can't identify what good is. And you can't even know what beautiful is, because is beauty something that's purely subjective, or is it something that was in the design that God created and says, behold, this is good, and this is beautiful, this is lovely. And so then if you don't know what those things are, then how do you know what justice is? And justice is that, what does the Bible say it is? If you don't know how to adjudicate truth, and you know what's good for man to be or do, or what man is, then how can one know how to adjudicate justice? And also, there's a word called liberty. And so these are the 6 great ideas. So they are truth, goodness, beauty, liberty, equality, and justice. And they are all intertwined with each other in ways that are fundamental. And you need the first couple to know how to navigate the others, according to Mortimer Adler. But also just in the worldview, your belief system is integrated. They're not isolated. It's like, this is good and this is true and they're separate. It's really trying to integrate those things. So how do you know what's just? You really don't know what's just apart from knowing how to identify what is good and true. And so from time to time, I'll just kind of talk about that. I just want to throw that thought out to you and see what you think. But I just want to caution you, like he says here in the book, he has a section just on skepticism, and it's very similar to C.S. Lewis. Let me just read a section. It says, it is possible to be either a liar or a skeptic, but you can't be both. Of course, it is also possible that you could quite preferable to be neither. He says, the person who maintains that he knows nothing because nothing is knowable, or who declares that no statement can be either true or false, indicates himself from telling lies. Interdicts himself from telling lies. His extreme skepticism removes him from the ordinary world in which most of us live, and in which, according to him, we live under an illusion that we can determine between statements that are true and statements that are false. And he says, if you live in that world, then if you think we live in a world where we can, and you think it's a delusion, then there's no point to anything that we're doing. Also, that if you are a pure skeptic, that you actually serve no purpose or good for those of us who do believe in truth, because you're not necessarily searching for it. You're just trying to tear things apart. And that's the actual other side of the coin. So anyway, some thoughts for you. I know that might seem a little wonky, but it does boil down to a verse that I like, and that's a famous verse in Philippians. And I have my Bible here, so let me grab it. Philippians 4, Verse 8 says, and finally, brothers, whatever is true, there you have your truth, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, so you have your beauty, your truth, your justice, whatever is commendable, whatever is noble, that kind of a thing, whatever is excellent, this is a standard of good. If there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned about and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And this isn't kind of like, oh, just think of good things and never think of bad things. This is actually contemplate what those things are. Contemplate how you know what is good. How do you know what is honorable? Think about that. Determine for yourself how you will live in such things and how they interrelate. I think this is the job of every Christian, is to the best of our abilities in a community, to figure out how our worldview can be more consistent. And I think that'll help when we run into problems like, what is a woman? What is human life? When does it begin? Because I think these are vitally important issues. And if you're afraid to actually answer those questions, then I think that could really do harm to society. Anyway, God bless you. I hope you're doing well. And I hope that blessed you in some way. But if not, I'm still going to continue to talk. Nice chatting with you guys. I'll talk to you later. God bless. Godspeed.